Alright, you can see here I've got my vertical fin installed, and I've also went ahead and installed my tail blades here. Now I'm going to go ahead and get ready to install this into the helicopter, but before I do, make sure that you install your tail servo linkage guides onto the boom before you get any further, because once you get this in the tail block back here, you're not really going to be able to get these on. You could try spreading them apart and snapping them over the boom, but there's the distinct possibility that all you're going to do is break it off. So, like I said, just make sure you get these on there. It's very simple. They just slide down. Oh. And as far as what side that you put the screws on, doesn't really matter. So, alright, now to the frame here. Now, before we get any further with trying to get this into this, first thing we got to do is take this tail block out. And to do this, you're going to need a 2mm hex drive. And what you're going to want to do is, you can see here, there's 4 screws on each side that hold this tail block in. You got one here, here, and here. Now, all these screws here in the frame we're actually going to be taking out anyways, but again, we're just going to do the tail block here. So I'm going to take out the 8 screws for it, but then I'm also going to do is loosen up these other 4 screws. And what it is we actually got to spread the frame apart to get that tail block out. And you can't do that if you have those other screws in there. So, you just take these out. Alright, now I should be able to spread this part just enough to slide this tail box out. And you can see, here we go. Now, one thing about this is it's got these little nubs right here that actually fit into spots on the frame. These little holes. Now, sometimes these you may need to trim these down just a tad, because a lot of times they're going to be a little bit too big, so when you go to put this back together, the frame sides aren't going to want to sit level. So just check to see if you got to do that. Now what you got to do is got to pry this thing apart, which needless to say is not the easiest thing to do. Generally, if you take a little screwdriver and stick it down in here, you can kind of start to pry it apart. And as I mentioned, you can take a little flathead and start to pry it apart. A little bit on the top, a little bit on the bottom, you know, and go back and forth. But now the other thing you can do to make it even easier is take something, and these silver parts here, they just push right out. Just be careful that you don't use something that can actually damage the threads there. See, they come right out, and if you slide those out, this will actually come apart a lot easier. Now sometimes they'll come out like you'll push it and it won't go through, so try pushing it from the other side. And you don't actually have to push them all the way out, only halfway out. But now you can see the tail box comes right apart. And then with the tail box apart, now we can go ahead and wrap the belt around this little pulley here. You want to make sure that the belt isn't twisted inside the boom. Now there's actually just enough room to kind of look down in there, and you can see if the belt is too twisted up. But basically, when you pull on the top of the belt, the tail blades should move in the same direction that you're pulling the belt. Now if you're pulling on the top of the belt and say the blades are moving in the opposite direction, that means the belt has a twist in it. Now sometimes the belt can have a full twist in it, so that when you pull on the top of the belt here, the blades move in the right direction. But when you do this, you can actually feel the teeth on each other rubbing against each other. So that's how you know that the belt is got a twist in it, a full twist. But when it's untwisted, it should move nice and smooth. So now what we're going to do is take it and give the tail belt a quarter twist clockwise. So it's like, trying to get so you can see this. Just like this here. And I'm going to go quarter turn clockwise. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is I want to get this positioned around the pulley. Get that set. Now go ahead and stick this side on. Now one thing I should have mentioned, actually let me take it apart here. The tail belt, or the tail boom here, it's got this little slit, and that little slice corresponds to a little groove here on this part. So when you go to put these together, if it's not snapping together right, just give it a little twist here just to make sure that it gets together. And then you can actually go ahead and slide these back down through, and that'll help hold the tail box together. Now if it's really tight going through, just take it, press it on something hard, and you'll see it'll go right through. I'll go ahead and install all these, and then I'm going to get ready to do some stuff to the frame, so that way I can get ready to put this onto the frame. Alright, now before I go ahead and install the tail boom and tail block back into the frame, there's a couple things I want to do first. Now, you'll see here I've taken off the battery mount, the battery tray, off the front of it. This is plastic, so the screws holding this on will not be getting any thread locker. But the rest of the screws on here will be getting thread locker. But I'm not going to apply thread locker to all the bolts just yet. Initially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 4 out and apply thread locker to these 4, and then I'm going to do the same 4 on the other side. Now the reason I'm not going to apply thread locker to these ones just yet is because I'm actually going to take the bearing blocks out to mount the servos. So initially I'm just going to leave those as they are, and this one back here, I'm not going to do this one just yet. I'm going to wait until I get the tail boom installed, and the reason for that is this screw is the screw you use to hold the tail boom support on. So you want to make sure that you do that after you've got the boom on and after you put your tail boom supports on. And these two I'm going to leave loose until I get the tail block there installed in the frame. Then I'll go through and remove these, apply thread locker, and then put them back in and tighten them down. But like I said, initially I'm just going to do these 4 and then the 4 on the opposite side. And then now I'm going to go ahead and very carefully spread the frame apart just a little bit to get the tail block down in here. Now make sure that these sides sit down flush with the tail box there. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, that sometimes you may have to file that little plastic nub down just a little bit so that it snaps in there nice and smooth. But after you do that, what I would recommend is go through, put the 4 screws in on one side, apply just a tad of thread locker to them. And then after you get those 4 in, just pull the boom back just a little bit to get some tension on the belt, and then go ahead and put the other 4 screws in and then tighten them down. Now that all the screws are tight, I also went ahead and tightened down the 4 screws holding the tail servo mount on, these 2, and then the 2 on the opposite side there. So now I'm going to go ahead and mount the skids. Skids mount with 2 bolts, one here and one here. But you're actually going to want to take out that one too, and make sure you apply thread locker to all 3 of these. You don't need to take that one out to mount the skids, but like I said, you just need to apply thread locker to that one. Okay, skids are all mounted. Now to turn my attention to the tail boom supports here. So you've got your horizontal fin, you got the 2 mounts, and then you got some screws, and your tail boom supports. Now, these actually come glued on, but sometimes you can actually take them off, and if you can get them off, make sure you apply your own glue to them. You don't want these being loose. They can actually vibrate and cause vibrations in the helicopter. So just make sure you glue them on, and as I was mentioning before, make sure if you do glue them, that you don't glue them in the wrong spot. So you're going to want this like this, but if you glued it sideways, well, you're going to be in trouble. But anyways, so you got these 2 brackets here, and they look vaguely similar, but one of them is the top and one of them is the bottom. The bottom is the one with the screw holes on the side. And as you can imagine, those screw holes are for the tail boom supports. And up here on the top part here, see here, this is how it's going to go. Put the half moon shape here, the front part, make sure that's facing the front of the helicopter. So that way you can put your fin right on top. And all these bolts get some thread locker. Okay, tail boom supports are all on. Now, last part of the frame build is just going ahead and installing the tail servo linkage. So just go ahead, unscrew one end of it, slide it through, screw the end back on, and like I said, that takes care of the first part of assembling the frame and the tail.